Hey everyone, and welcome back to Behind the Spacebar. Today we're talking about how to improve your sound check. Now I know it sounds super boring, but bear with me. Stay with me. This is going to be a quick episode. I've got, I think 5 tips to help you improve your sound check that you're not going to want to miss. If this is your first time listening, watching Behind the Spacebar, thanks so much for joining me. This is a podcast for musicians, music directors, playback techs, really anyone using Ableton Live to perform on stage. And each week we chat for just briefly for a few minutes. I share some tips and tricks on using Ableton Live, some things I've learned, and today is no different. I want to talk about sound check, and again, this maybe sounds like super boring and you're like, come on, man, you run out of ideas. Now I got plenty of ideas. Trust me, that's not a problem. But this is something that I think is important because a successful sound check helps you have a successful show. The same way I say the same thing about rehearsal. Having a successful rehearsal lets you have a successful show. I know a lot of you watching and listening to this are in a situation where you're on fly dates. You're doing festival dates where your sound check, if you even have a sound check, is 10 to 15 minutes, if even that, maybe 5 to 10. I remember one of my favorite shows of all time. We got stuck in DC traffic. By the time we got there, I think we had 5 minutes and then doors opened. And as doors are opening, we're like still sound checking, hoping and praying we get through everything. And the show was great. It was super fun. But I think sound check is super important. Sometimes we look at it as a necessary evil, which I get it. Sometimes it is. But I also have a little bit maybe deeper appreciation for sound check, is spending about 2 years as an audio guy, front of house audio guy. So I understand someone who has been on stage and played on stage for longer than I've been an audio guy. I didn't appreciate sound check until I was the audio guy and realized sound check helps the front of house audio engineer get things dialed in the way that they need them to be, helps you get your in-ears dialed in, and it makes for, again, a better performance, no matter what type of context we're talking about here. So let's get into this really quickly. About 5 tips to help you have a better sound check, to make your sound check a lot more successful. Number 1 is do a line check. Now, if you're on the road, you probably know what a line check is. You've probably done this before. If you're in a church scenario situation, installed situation, I would bet you probably have never done a line check or haven't done one since you got into your new space. So let's clarify what a line check is. A sound check is checking levels. It's checking levels of instruments, EQ of instruments, levels of in-ears. A line check is basically making sure that guitar is in the guitar channel, click is in the correct channel. That basically, when the audio engineer moves faders or adjusts in-ears, that when she's moving the kick drum, it's actually the kick drum. It's not necessarily gain. Sometimes you can use that to set gain. It's more of just kick. Yes. Okay. That's right. Snare. Yep. That's right. In-ears, lead in-ears. Yep. That's right. Line check is super important. Here's why it's super important. Garbage in, garbage out. And that really applies to sound check, right? If you're giving your audio engineer a terrible guitar tone, it's going to make sound check longer because they're going to have to take time. But it really applies to line check. Sound checks sometimes go really long because you don't do a line check to make sure that my inputs are what they say they are and my outputs are what they say they are. And by that, practically, again, I kind of gave some examples as we're walking through this, but you want to make sure that what you see on your console is really what you're getting. When you turn up the kick mic, you want to make sure it's actually the kick mic and not the snare. When you're adjusting in-ears for the band, you want to make sure that you have the right in-ear pack. If you don't do a line check, you're not going to know that. And you could really quickly do a line check. It doesn't take long at all. The most practical ways I've done it before is someone on stage with a mic plugging into direct boxes, plugging into the stage snake, and just double checking that things are where they are. When it comes to tracks, this is super important. Particularly, you have a lot of outputs, a lot of things to make it easier to sound check. 2 resources I want to share. Number 1 is my line check template. You could get this on the shop. If you're a subscriber, you can get this for free. But you can go to the page and check out the template here. See what's included in it. You can check all your outputs. Basically, just press play and you'll hear output 1, output 2, output 3. So I go all the way, 8 outputs all the way to 24. And then there's audio samples for you to build your own custom template to check with if you want to as well too. And then Oaktone, my buddy Jeff over at Oaktone, has a line check Max for Live device, which is pretty cool. You could drop this on and it will run through all your outputs for you. You can set your routing. Again, just really cool stuff in this. Jeff's device is a lot cheaper than my device. but it does require Max for Live, but a really great resource. So check out the line check template. Again, I'll link to that in the show notes of this. Check out Jeff's line check Max for Live device. Those are really going to help both with checking, those particular devices will help checking tracks and stuff, but you should also just do a line check for everything kind of in general, which will really help. Again, make sure your inputs are what they say they're at front of house, your outputs are, make sure your in-ears are the correct channels, so that once you bring up drums in the drum in-ear pack, that's actually the drum in-ear pack, okay? Number 2, try for a virtual sound check. So this is more probably for front of house engineers or music directors listening to this that are interfacing with, tour managers, front of house people. Virtual sound check, you can get into your rehearsal space. You can record your rehearsal, record your previous set. And if you're going to do a similar set, you can play back those tracks into your console, and the audio engineer can actually kind of pre-do EQ and check things to the point where you could get really, really close. Essentially, they play back tracks, and they go, okay, how are these tracks responding in this room? They maybe make changes on the main output to get it to respond like they expect it to. There's too much low end, so they carve that out a little bit. They can check the inputs on channels, and then you can step on stage and have a sound check that's a lot lower, a lot less time than it was before. In fact, when you reach a certain status as a band, I've gone to see a few of my friends recently, and that are playback techs, and we asked, so where's the band? When did they sound check? And they started laughing and said, oh, they haven't sound checked themselves in years. They just do a virtual sound check, and then the techs get on stage and hit drums to make sure drums, do a line check to make sure things are what they say they are and they sound similar. And then they do a virtual sound check, and the audio engineer goes, great. And then the band walks on stage and plays, right? Which is super great. But a virtual sound check will help you get EQ set, get a lot closer. You pair that with a line check, you're going to be great. Okay. 2 more tips that I have that are going to make soundcheck and improve soundcheck a lot. So really only 4 tips. I said 5 earlier, but only 4 tips. This actually comes to when it actually comes time to soundcheck. So we talked about doing a line check. If you can, do a virtual sound check. But number 3, when it comes time for a sound check individually, meaning one person at a time. One of my pet peeves when I was a music director, I'd led bands, pet peeve definitely as a front of house audio guy, would be trying to check drums while the guitar players like trying their best attempt at John Mayer, slow dancing in a burning room. And I'm like, this is not helping me get the best tone out of the drums right now. So check individually, one person at a time. Drum set, I do each individual piece. Then I play drums. I go, okay, drums feel good. And then from there, I check in-ears, right? So I check each individual thing. And then we go, okay, how are drums for everyone in ears? Okay, feel good. All right, then we go to the next instrument, bass, guitar, keys, whatever. Work your way down your console there. Get all your inputs set. But what's super helpful, this is something that makes sound checks run on forever. This is something that makes great bands sound like absolute crap, is you don't take sound checks seriously. You don't respect the sound engineer. And so you just play through sound check constantly as they're trying to get things dialed in, get your tone set, and then just shut up and sit down, right? Speaking to guitar players, because we're the absolute worst. I am a guitar player. We're the absolute worst. We never stop playing. Drummers, you get your drums tuned, and then you sit down and shut up and just wait, right? You go through each instrument, get everything dialed in. If you play individually, it's going to make things so much easier. It's going to make checking ear levels and gain so much easier. Tone and EQ will get dialed in so much easier from the front of house engineer. It's going to go way more successfully if you do that. And then number 4, finally, tip for sound check. Once you're done with all that, then run a full song. Run a full song, make it all the way through, start to finish. Once you're done, then check in-ear tweaks, on that, make any tweaks you have to that. And then if you need to, run another song or half. And if you work through this process from start to finish, your sound check will go from 30 minutes. And some of you, again, are laughing. You're like, I wish I had a 30-minute sound check, particularly in a church setting. I've seen sound checks go 40 to 45 minutes, and they could easily be 10 minutes. If you, number 1, do a line check. Number 2, try a virtual sound check if you can. Number 3, check each instrument individually. And then number 4, run a full song at the end, make tweaks. And if you need to, run, a minute of a song afterwards, just to make sure those tweaks held up and worked really well. So those are 4 tips. on how to improve your sound check. And again, I think this is super important because a great sound check will lead to a great performance. And you've got to remember, I should do an episode on this at some point, but I had this epiphany as I transitioned into being a front of house audio guy, from being a guy on stage for years and years, to realizing a great sounding band. You go to a show, you hear a great sounding band. It's a combination of both the musicians, the people on stage, the singers. It's a combination of the people on stage and the person running front of house. You could have the best band in the world. If they have a crappy front of house engineer, they're going to sound crappy. You have the best front of house engineer in the world, and if you have a crappy band, it's going to sound crappy. So having a sound check is going to help bridge the gap between those two things, to have a great band, a great front of house audio engineer, kind of make everything cohesive and work together. So that's what I got for this week. Make sure you stick around for next week. We're going to continue the conversation and have fun on Behind the Spacebar. If you like this, do me a favor, leave us a rating and review over on Apple Podcasts. It's the main place where people find us. If you're watching on YouTube, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment. I like when people interact, even if you disagree with what I say, or you go, man, you missed the biggest, whatever, you missed the best way to improve your sound check. Leave comments on that stuff on YouTube. I love it. If you're a jerk, I'll just delete your comment, so don't be a jerk. But even if you disagree with me, you could disagree and not be a jerk, and I love that stuff. I love interacting with you guys in comments. So leave those comments, leave your ratings and reviews. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.